Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another video brought to you by the Merrimack Institute for New Teacher Support at Merrimack College. Today, we're excited to have Alexandra Souris do a presentation that she actually did in January for a MINT's workshop. But now we wanted to record the presentation so that if you weren't able to attend, you can see it now. And this will also be in our community and civic engagement playlist on YouTube. So without further ado, Alexandra Souris currently serves as the Freshman Life Coordinator at St. John's Preparatory in Danvers, Mass. She's a recent graduate of the M.Ed program at Merrimack College for community engagement. And she has 15 years of experience teaching and developing humanities curricula in public, private, and residential settings. Her teaching style combines intellectual and moral development, critical and creative skills, along with collaborative capabilities and the practice of civic responsibilities. Her Think Global, Act Local philosophy promotes applied learning and real-world connections in her classroom and beyond. And she was recently accepted into the Doctor of Education program in Curriculum, Teaching and Learning and Leadership at Northeastern University. So that's a little bit about our presenter, and we're so happy to have you here today. And whenever you're ready, please share your screen to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Started. All right. So grateful to have everyone here. My goal for today is just to tell you a little bit about bringing the outside into your classroom in hopes of helping students to develop a sense of understanding about the communities they live in and their role in the communities. So without further ado, let's see here. Just a little bit about my background. I've taught in public, private, and residential schools. Throughout that time, I've really experienced some wonderful students, wonderful achievements, but also a lot of frustrations. So that brought me to analyze my own methods of teaching and opened my eyes to this idea, the game changer for me, which is community partnerships. Just a little bit more about my philosophy of education. I basically promote this idea, as Amanda had mentioned, of both intellectual and moral development. Being able to communicate clearly, apply the knowledge and skills that you've learned within a classroom in a way that promotes diversity, culture, and helps the student to really recognize what their role within the community is, as well as demonstrate social and emotional intelligence, being able to understand, the difference between a good source and a bad source, as well as to work together and work cooperatively when necessary for the common goal or common good of all. So you'll see here a John Dewey quote. I guess anytime you see an educational presenter, John Dewey always seems to pop up. So again, the idea that if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. This really applies to my master's work, where my goal was a shift from the idea of civics that is classroom-based and also content-based to a more skills-based, community-based. So you'll find that, kind of weaved in throughout this. All right. So just to speak briefly, I know that, well, first of all, I hope that everybody has really gone beyond surviving this year and thriving in some way. Obviously teaching through a pandemic or living through a pandemic is difficult for both the teacher, the students, as well as school community and beyond. Just to tell you a little bit about our model here at St. John's. Currently, we have what was called the HELM model, hybrid education learning model, where students are on campus via cohort. So they're split via cohort per grade. So each grade has two cohorts, A and B. Cohort A will be on campus for 2 days, then cohort B for 2 days, and then that continues throughout the quarter. And it has been working. We have the benefit of Zoom rooms, which I believe I have. Nope. So Zoom rooms, students and students are able to be seen in the front of the room and the back of the room that are home remotely. So I'll perhaps have 10 students in front of me, and I'll have another 10 at home, which allows students to access the curriculum even when they are on their remote days. All right. So again, at this point, I would love to hear, what you are doing right now. So just kind of in your mind, think, okay, is my model similar to Allie's, or is it something different? And I'll try to speak to all the different options as I go throughout today. So I'd like you to just reflect for a moment. If you had to teach one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be? And taking consideration the content or the skill that you perhaps feel is most most important for your students, or what you just enjoy and what you're passionate about. And then I'd also like you to consider, if you didn't have to teach it ever again, what would that be? And my goal in having you do this, quick little exercise is to really start to think, where you are as a teacher, can impact how you teach your students in terms of, how comfortable are you, or how familiar are you with a topic, or how unfamiliar. And one of the things that I kind of challenge you to do is, try something that you're familiar with, maybe take it to that next step. And perhaps if you're unfamiliar with it, perhaps look for somebody that is familiar with it, that could be an expert or a resource for you or your students, and invite them into class. Again, if you, in the back of your mind, be like, okay, this is what I would always teach if I could, and this is what I would never teach. So just keep that in the back of your brain for right now. All right. So when I say community partnerships in education, a lot of things probably come to mind. The idea that for a long time, especially in K to 12, when somebody says community partnerships, the focus is really on how can the community serve the student. And that's not necessarily the type of partnership that I'm speaking of, okay? Where we're looking for partnerships that are mutually beneficial. We're looking for partnerships that there have some reciprocity to it. And they can be intellectual. They can, be service oriented. They can also just be an exchange of ideas, and so forth. So I'd like to kind of shift the idea that community partnerships are only about deficit-based, about the community serving the student, especially in a K to 12 setting, and really just shift to this idea that community partnerships are more mutually beneficial, and the emphasis can be in the classroom, and it can be service-based, but it's also can be intellectual. So that brings about, how could we use community partnerships in your classroom? How could your students use the content from your class to impact their community? So an example of this, and we'll talk a little bit further in just a little bit about this, is this idea of, I teach a global studies class, and I know that in my last 15 years of teaching, I have not included the idea of Indigenous voices enough. So rather than try to do that all on my own, I contacted Survival International, international organization, to help me with this content in my class, to help my students better understand tribal voices, tribal topics and issues. And so that would be one way. I recognized that something was missing in my course, and this was my way of saying, okay, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this well enough. What can I do to change it? So that would be an example. So again, it goes back to that idea of, what are you passionate about, but also what is it that perhaps is missing from your class, or you just genuinely do not like to teach it, and why not look for a resource that can help you? So, okay. Okay, so how can you create community partnerships? As we started to talk about, obviously knowing your content is important, but also knowing it and looking at it through the lens of how can I use this content to solve real world problems? Okay, so then once you're able to look at your content, um, whether it be the thing you're most passionate about or the thing that you're least passionate about, look at that content and say, okay, now how can I use this to actually solve problems and make a connection of real life application for my students? The next thing after that, once you've kind of narrowed down, like, okay, this is kind of what I want to focus on, I think this would be helpful to my students, it would, make me a better teacher. Then you start to look at your community. What are our community needs? Where do I find resources? The probably most impactful for me is allowing my students to kind of take ownership over the community partnerships. And you can do that, by encouraging them to, think outside of the box and be flexible while you're doing the same thing. And, they contact community partners, allow them to draft emails, allow them to make phone calls. Obviously, grade dependent, but it's a really good shift in ownership of education towards students. And a lot of this model comes from project-based learning, where you're combining kind of that real world application with the rigor and content that your school curriculum or your curriculum calls for. So moving on. All right, this is probably the hardest part, right? Where do I start? As in anywhere, usually your colleagues, your department, people that, teach similar topics to you, or people in other, if you look to a co-disciplinary partnership, you can start small. This idea that, if you are in a global studies class, you connect with a world language teacher, and then, you brainstorm and you come up with, okay, this would be kind of a cool idea, even within the walls of our school. And then you can identify, somebody that is across, maybe in your community, whether, if you're teaching a math course and you're teaching banking, then you connect with a local bank. Or if you're teaching about a martial art and you want to connect with, people in Israel about Krav Maga or something like that. You always just kind of, you start brainstorming and then you just take those steps to perhaps grow that concept of, okay, we're localized right now and let's go a little bit further out, with every unit or so forth. Okay. This is probably the best slide and hopefully the viewers are able to read it. I think they can. This concept of engaging all leaders is a really powerful one. As you can see here, leadership looks a lot. Leadership, you find leaders in a bunch of different sections or sectors of the community, whether it be government, public, private agencies, families, students, educators, higher ed, or business and foundations. These are your resources here, right? So students are resources, families, government, businesses, higher ed, these are all resources. And so it's up to you to figure out, how does the content and skill that I am trying to impart or teach my students connect to these resources, and what problems are there that this content and skill that I am teaching within our community, what can we solve and who can we partner with to do so? It's just a really powerful model of really connecting students to engage in the community, to understand issues, understand the content and skill that you're trying to teach, but then also to be able to take action and really connect with a trusted adult within the community that can really kind of open their eyes to the real world application. All right. When you think about this concept of civic understanding, again, this is a facing history tool where at the center of it is civic agency. Again, this kind of understanding of the importance of systems and connections and so forth, as well as of course, we all want to be great teachers who really challenge our students to think critically. So there's that intellectual rigor piece, as well as ethical reflection, right and wrong, being able to understand problems and try to help to fix them. And of course, the emotional engagement, the empathy, the building of compassion and so forth. And that moral, again, the ethical and the emotional, kind of that moral development as well. So that's that. Now, probably my favorite part is being able to talk a little bit about how community partners are used in my classroom. So starting, I spoke about Survival International. Again, their goal is to raise up tribal voices in a way that helps students to understand that Indigenous peoples are alive and contribute to society currently, and also, of course, make sure that the human rights of Indigenous people are being valued as well. One Ocean, One Love shop in Rockport, we actually connected with them to really focus on the environmental needs, both locally, but also in a little bit of understanding more about how to, run business in a way that is environmentally friendly. Collective Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai is a local martial arts self-defense. And they were able to help us to really kind of zone in to different regions of the world and what is being practiced, in Latin America, and then shifting to Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. So the students have really enjoyed connecting with Andrew at Collective Jiu-Jitsu. Then the Islamic Academy for Peace, a wonderful resource. Zahara Zawawi, we've connected with her in our study of Africa and Algeria, and being able to really explore this concept of Islam and Muslims, and to speak about kind of some of the contributions and struggles of them as well. And then lastly, partnership with Converse in Boston, the Boston-based Converse, where we look at the global market in our study of globalization, and particularly in this case in Asia, and how the global market works. So I show a little bit more about the entry event for our study of Africa. Zahara Zawawi, you'll see here, she wrote a letter to my students at the end of last year, and introduced herself in the letter, rather than me saying, okay guys, we're studying Algeria, we're studying Africa. It really is a human connection where it gets students to look at real world problems from somebody from that area, which I think can be super powerful. So, for example, Zahara, a Muslim woman, asking the boys to consider St. John's all boys school, what is the perception of Muslim women? This concept of, have you ever thought of the difference between an immigrant and a refugee? And, even so far to have the students really think about, okay, what are some of the push-pull factors of why people, leave their homeland, enter a new homeland. Again, once you create a community partnership that allows the students to see, really to connect with somebody who perhaps does not look like them or practice the same religion as they do, it just opens the door to a deeper understanding, and I would say a deeper buy-in to what it is that they're studying. So, oh wow. At this point, I would love, Amanda, I hopefully that was fine. I know I'm going pretty fast, but
No, it was perfect.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to share some of my takeaways. So yes, this was the presentation in January. There's a lot of, small group discussions and reflective thinking, but I'm really glad that you were able to pose those questions still, so that people watching at home right now can think about, that thing you're saying of what could you teach for the rest of your life or what would you not? And I really like that you're able to bring in all of these examples. I think it's really helpful to see, and even like seeing the logos or just seeing things and saying like that. Do I have that in my area or could I contact them? And the Islamic Academy for Peace is amazing. And we have many of those members in our own men's community. So shout out to them. But yeah, thank you for sharing those examples and the letters. And I was going to just say that if anybody's watching and wasn't able to fully see the Engaging All Leaders photo, I would be happy to send you the PDF. Allie sent that to me after her workshop in January. So just reach out to mints@merrimack.edu and I'd be happy to send that your way. But overall, this is awesome. And thank you so much for sharing this again to anybody who wasn't able to see it. But I'll let this last minute be yours to say any last words if you have any.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it. Basically, I just want to thank you for taking the time to, as the viewer, for really taking the time to kind of open your mind to, okay, how do I best engage my students? How do I help them to understand the world that they live in by creating these real world applications? I think, community partners are just such a great resource. And I would be happy, to chat with anybody about, some ideas that they have or brainstorm, and I look forward to, to seeing many more people kind of go along this journey in this process.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, thank you all for watching and we will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.